The night was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that weighed heavily on the ears, broken only by the faint hum of crickets. A long stretch of road cut through the countryside, flanked by thick trees that swayed under the pale light of the moon. Daniel tightened his grip on the steering wheel, yawning. He had been driving for hours, returning from a business trip in the city. The clock on the dashboard blinked 2:47 a.m. Fatigue tugged at him, but the desolate road offered no place to rest. It was then that he saw her. A figure stood by the roadside, illuminated in the dim glow of his headlights. She was dressed in white, an old-fashioned gown that brushed the ground like mist. Her long black hair hung loose, hiding most of her face. One arm was raised, her hand extended in a subtle wave, signaling for him to stop. Daniel blinked hard. For a moment, he thought his tired eyes were playing tricks on him. But no, she was real. Standing perfectly still, like a statue. The moonlight seemed to dance around her, casting an ethereal glow that made her appear almost translucent. His first instinct was to keep driving. Who in their right mind would stop for a stranger on a deserted road at this hour? But something about her presence compelled him to slow down. Maybe it was pity. Maybe curiosity. Or maybe something deeper, something he couldn't name. The car decelerated, almost of its own accord, until it came to a gentle stop beside the mysterious figure. He rolled down the window slightly, leaning out. "Miss, are you all right? Do you need help?" His voice sounded unnaturally loud in the stillness of the night, echoing slightly before being swallowed by the darkness. The woman didn't answer. She only tilted her head slightly, her face hidden in the shadows. Slowly, she stepped forward, her hand resting on the back door handle. Without waiting for permission, she opened the door and slid into the back seat. The movement was fluid, almost graceful, as if she were floating rather than walking. Daniel's pulse quickened. She moved without a sound, her white gown flowing unnaturally, as if untouched by the night breeze. The air in the car seemed to grow colder, and he could see his breath misting in front of him. A shiver ran down his spine, but he tried to convince himself it was just the chill of the night air. Trying to calm himself, he cleared his throat. "Where are you headed?" He attempted to keep his voice steady, but there was a slight tremor that he couldn't quite hide. The silence that followed his question was deafening, broken only by the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Her voice came soft, almost a whisper, but chillingly clear. "Straight ahead. I'll tell you when to stop." The words seemed to hang in the air, each syllable distinct and haunting. Daniel felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up, but he nodded nervously, putting the car back in gear. The silence grew unbearable as the road stretched on endlessly. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Her pale figure sat rigidly in the back seat, her face still obscured by her hair. The moonlight filtering through the windows cast strange shadows across her form, making her appear both solid and insubstantial at the same time. For the next 10 minutes, she didn't move, didn't speak, only stared forward. Daniel's knuckles whitened around the wheel. The air in the car felt colder, every breath heavier than the last. He tried to focus on the road ahead, but his eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, half expecting her to vanish or transform into something terrifying. The trees on either side of the road seemed to grow denser, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. The moonlight struggled to penetrate the thick canopy, plunging the car into near darkness at times. Daniel's imagination ran wild, conjuring up all manner of supernatural horrors lurking just beyond the reach of his headlights. Then, out of nowhere, she spoke again. "Stop, right here." Her voice cut through the silence like a knife, causing Daniel to jump slightly. He looked around, seeing nothing but trees and darkness. There were no houses, no landmarks, nothing to indicate why this spot was significant. Daniel slowed the car, pulling onto the side of the empty road. His heart raced as he brought the vehicle to a complete stop. The engine idled, its low rumble the only sound in the eerie stillness. He took a deep breath, steeling himself to turn and face his mysterious passenger. He turned to look at her directly for the first time, but the back seat was empty. Where moments ago sat a woman in white, there was now nothing but shadows and the faint impression of cold air. Daniel blinked rapidly, his mind struggling to process what his eyes were telling him. The door hadn't opened. There was no sound of footsteps. She was simply gone, vanished into thin air, as if she had never been there at all. Daniel's breath caught in his throat, a cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. A shiver ran down Daniel's spine. His heart pounded violently as he scrambled out of the car, scanning the desolate road. Nothing. No figure in white. No sign that anyone had ever been there. The night air felt oppressive, heavy with an unseen presence that seemed to press in from all sides. And then, from the trees nearby came a faint sound, a woman's laugh, soft, echoing, slowly fading into the night. It started as a gentle chuckle, growing into a melodious giggle that seemed to dance on the breeze. The laughter held no malice, but its otherworldly quality sent chills down Daniel's spine. Daniel froze, his breath turning to mist in the air. He knew in that instant that he had picked up something far from human. The realization hit him like a physical blow, leaving him gasping for air. His mind raced, trying to rationalize what had just happened, but finding no logical explanation. The laughter faded, leaving behind a silence more profound than before. The trees seemed to lean in, their branches creaking softly as if whispering secrets to one another. Daniel stood rooted to the spot, unable to move, unable to think clearly. The clock on his dashboard blinked again. 3 a.m. The witching hour had begun. Daniel felt a chill run through him as he remembered old stories about this time of night, when the veil between worlds was said to be at its thinnest. He stumbled back to his car, fumbling with the keys as he tried to start the engine. It roared to life, headlights cutting through the darkness. Daniel didn't spare a moment to look back. He pressed the accelerator to the floor, tires squealing as he sped away from the spot where the woman had vanished. As he drove, his mind replayed the events of the night. The woman in white, her silent presence, her mysterious disappearance. It all seemed like a dream, a hallucination brought on by fatigue and the lateness of the hour. But the chill that lingered in the air and the echo of that ethereal laughter in his ears told him it had been all too real. Daniel drove on through the night, the trees gradually thinning as he approached more populated areas. The first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the eastern sky when he finally pulled into the driveway of his home. He sat in the car for a long moment, gathering his thoughts and trying to make sense of his encounter. As he stepped out of the car, a gentle breeze rustled through the trees lining his street. For a moment, he thought he caught a whiff of a familiar scent, something old and floral, like dried roses. He shook his head, dismissing it as his imagination. But as he walked to his front door, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that his brief encounter with the woman in white had opened his eyes to a world beyond the ordinary, a realm of mysteries and shadows that existed just beyond the edge of perception. Daniel unlocked his door and stepped inside, closing it firmly behind him. As he did, he made a silent vow to himself. He would uncover the truth behind the woman in white, no matter where that search might lead him. Little did he know, his journey into the unknown had only just begun. Create 100 images that are consistent with the video content. Daniel's heart pounded as he stepped into the diner, the phantom laughter still echoing in his ears. The warm aroma of coffee and the sight of locals going about their morning routines offered a fleeting sense of normalcy. He slid into a booth, his trembling hands wrapping around the steaming mug the waitress placed before him. The words tumbled out before he could stop them. Have you ever heard of a woman in white? On the road outside town? The waitress froze, her eyes darting to an elderly man seated at the counter. He lowered his newspaper, fixing Daniel with a piercing gaze. "You saw her, didn't you?" the old man asked, his voice gravelly with age and knowing. Daniel hesitated, then nodded slowly. She waved me down. I let her in. But when I stopped the car, she was gone. A hush fell over the diner, the usual morning chatter dying away as if a switch had been flipped. The old man let out a heavy sigh, his weathered face etched with concern. "That's no ordinary woman," he said, his tone low and ominous. "That's her." Daniel leaned forward, his throat suddenly dry. "Who?" The old man's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, as if speaking her name too loudly might summon her. "The White Lady. She's been haunting these roads for decades. Some say she was a bride, killed on her wedding night when her carriage overturned on that stretch of road. Others claim she was a mother, searching for her child who drowned in the nearby river. Whatever the truth, she never left." The waitress crossed herself, muttering a prayer under her breath. "Those who give her a ride, they never forget her. Some say she follows them home." Daniel's skin prickled, a chill running down his spine despite the warmth of the diner. "Follows them?" The old man nodded grimly, his eyes never leaving Daniel's face. "She chooses people. Once she's ridden with you, you'll see her again. Always at night. Always when you're alone." Daniel swallowed hard, his chest tightening with each word. He wanted to dismiss it, to laugh it off as small-town superstition. But he couldn't shake the memory of her whisper, her presence in the car, the bone-deep cold that still lingered in his body. "Is there a way to stop her?" he asked, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to steady it. The old man stared at him for what felt like an eternity before finally speaking. "Some say she wants to be taken to her grave. Others believe she's cursed, forever wandering. But one thing's certain. Once you've crossed paths with her, you carry a piece of her with you." Daniel felt his stomach drop, a wave of nausea washing over him. His gaze drifted to the diner's window, catching his reflection in the glass. For just a second, he swore he saw another face behind his own. Pale, smiling. He blinked, and it was gone. The diner seemed to close in around him, the fluorescent lights suddenly too bright, the chatter of the few patrons too loud. Daniel pushed himself up from the booth, mumbling his thanks and tossing a few crumpled bills on the table. As he stumbled out into the morning sunlight, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The town, which had seemed like a sanctuary just moments ago, now felt oppressive. Every shadow held the potential for pale, reaching hands. Every reflection threatened to reveal that haunting smile. Daniel fumbled for his car keys, his hands shaking so badly he could barely grip them. He needed to leave, to put as much distance between himself and this cursed stretch of road as possible. But even as he slid behind the wheel, a part of him knew it was futile. The old man's words echoed in his mind. "Once you've crossed paths with her, you carry a piece of her with you." He started the engine, the familiar rumble offering little comfort. As he pulled out of the parking lot, his eyes darted to the rearview mirror. For a heart-stopping moment, he thought he saw a flash of white in the back seat, but when he whipped his head around, there was nothing but empty leather upholstery. The road stretched out before him, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the countryside. Daniel pressed down on the accelerator, watching the speedometer climb. He had no destination in mind, no plan beyond putting miles between himself and the memory of last night's encounter. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Daniel felt his eyelids growing heavy. The lack of sleep, combined with the adrenaline crash, was taking its toll. He spotted a rest stop ahead and pulled in, deciding a quick nap might help clear his head. He reclined his seat, trying to find a comfortable position. Just as he was about to drift off, a tap on his window jolted him awake. A state trooper stood outside, gesturing for him to roll down the window. "Everything all right, sir?" the officer asked, peering into the car. Daniel nodded, forcing a smile. "Just taking a quick break. Long night." The trooper's eyes narrowed slightly. "Where are you headed?" I'm not sure, Daniel admitted. Just driving. The officer's expression softened. Listen, there's a motel about 10 miles up the road. Why don't you get some proper rest? It's not safe to drive when you're this tired. Daniel nodded, grateful for the suggestion. He thanked the officer and pulled back onto the highway, the promise of a real bed suddenly irresistible. The motel was a small roadside affair, the kind of place that had seen better days but still offered clean sheets and hot showers. Daniel checked in, barely registering the concerned look from the desk clerk as he trudged to his room. He collapsed onto the bed, not even bothering to remove his shoes. Sleep claimed him almost instantly, pulling him into a deep, dreamless void. When Daniel awoke, the room was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. For a blissful moment, he forgot where he was and why he was there. Then the memories came crashing back. The woman in white, the diner, the old man's warnings. He sat up, rubbing his eyes and trying to shake off the lingering fog of sleep. The room was quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioner. Daniel reached for the TV remote, desperate for some background noise to fill the silence. As he flipped through the channels, a local news report caught his attention. The anchor was speaking about a series of strange occurrences in the area. Unexplained car accidents, drivers reporting ghostly figures on the road. Daniel's blood ran cold. He wasn't the only one who had seen her. A knock at the door made him jump. He approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. The motel manager stood outside, holding a stack of fresh towels. Daniel opened the door, forcing a smile. Thanks. I didn't... He stopped mid-sentence. Behind the manager, at the far end of the walkway, stood a figure in white. Even from this distance, he could see her pale face, her dark eyes fixed on him. The manager turned, following Daniel's gaze. Something wrong, sir? When Daniel looked again, the figure was gone. He shook his head, mumbling his thanks as he took the towels and quickly shut the door. His heart raced as he paced the small room. She had found him. The old man was right. She was following him. Daniel's mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. The bride killed on her wedding night, the mother searching for her lost child. Which story was true? Or were they both just attempts to explain something beyond explanation? As night fell, Daniel found himself unable to stay in the room any longer. The walls seemed to close in, every shadow holding the potential for pale, reaching hands. He grabbed his keys and headed for his car, with no clear destination in mind. The highway stretched out before him, empty, save for the occasional passing truck. Daniel drove aimlessly, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Every curve in the road, every flicker of movement in his peripheral vision made his heart skip a beat. It was nearing midnight when he saw her again. She stood on the shoulder of the road, her white dress billowing in a wind he couldn't feel. Daniel's foot instinctively moved to the brake, but he caught himself. He wouldn't stop. Not this time. As he sped past, he caught a glimpse of her face in his side mirror. She was smiling. Daniel pressed down harder on the accelerator, watching the speedometer climb. He had to outrun her, to break free from whatever curse he had stumbled into. But even as the miles flew by, he knew deep down that it was futile. The old man's words echoed in his mind once more. Once you've crossed paths with her, you carry a piece of her with you. As the first light of dawn broke on the horizon, Daniel realized he had come full circle. He was approaching the same stretch of road where he had first encountered the woman in white. His hands trembled on the steering wheel as he slowed the car. There, in the growing light, he saw something he hadn't noticed before. A small, weathered cross on the side of the road, nearly hidden by overgrown grass. Daniel pulled over, his heart pounding as he approached the marker. The inscription was faded, but still legible. In memory of Sarah Thompson, beloved wife and mother, may she find the peace in death she was denied in life. As Daniel stood there, staring at the cross, he felt a presence behind him. He turned slowly, already knowing what he would see. The woman in white stood there, her dark eyes fixed on him. But this time, there was no malice in her gaze, no eerie smile. She looked sad, lost. Daniel found his voice barely above a whisper. Is this where you need to go?" She nodded, a single tear rolling down her pale cheek. With trembling hands, Daniel reached out. The moment his fingers touched her spectral form, a wave of emotions washed over him. Grief, longing, a desperate need for rest. In that instant, he understood. She wasn't a malevolent spirit, but a lost soul, trapped between worlds. And now, finally, she had found someone who could see her, who could help her find her way home. As the sun rose fully over the horizon, the woman in white began to fade. Her form grew translucent, then disappeared entirely, leaving Daniel alone on the roadside. He stood there for a long time, watching as the world around him came to life with the new day. The weight that had settled on his chest since that first encounter began to lift. As he walked back to his car, Daniel felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in days. The woman in white was gone, her restless spirit finally at peace. And while he knew he would never forget her, he no longer feared the night or the lonely stretches of road. He started the engine, casting one last glance at the weathered cross. Then, with a deep breath, he pulled back onto the highway, ready to face whatever lay ahead on the open road. Daniel left the diner shaken, the old man's words gnawing at him. He told himself it was just superstition, a story meant to scare strangers. But deep down, he knew the truth. He could still feel her presence in the back seat, as if she had never really left. That night, Daniel checked into a small roadside motel, too exhausted to keep driving. The room was simple, a bed, a dresser, and a single mirror on the wall. He showered, trying to wash away the unease, and collapsed onto the bed. The flickering neon sign outside cast an eerie glow through the thin curtains, painting the room in shades of red and blue. Daniel tossed and turned, his mind replaying the old man's warning over and over. The woman in white, a vengeful spirit haunting this stretch of lonely highway. He tried to convince himself it was nonsense, but the chill that ran down his spine told a different story. As he drifted off into an uneasy sleep, the shadows in the room seemed to deepen, taking on strange, shifting forms. In his dreams, he saw her, a pale figure in a tattered white dress, standing motionless by the side of the road. Her face was hidden, but he could feel her eyes upon him, filled with a terrible longing. Sometime after midnight, he woke to a sound. Tap, tap, tap. The noise cut through the silence like a knife, jolting Daniel fully awake. He sat up, heart racing, straining his ears in the darkness. For a moment, there was nothing but the faint hum of the air conditioner. Then it came again. Knuckles rapped gently against his door. Daniel sat up, his chest tightening. He glanced at the clock. 3:07 a.m. The witching hour, his grandmother used to call it. When the veil between worlds was at its thinnest. Daniel shook his head, trying to dispel the thought. It was probably just another guest, confused about their room number. Or maybe the night manager with some sort of emergency. The tapping came again, louder this time. He forced himself to the door, peering through the peephole. No one was there. The hallway outside was empty, bathed in the sickly glow of fluorescent lights. Daniel blinked, rubbing his eyes. He must have imagined it, some remnant of his nightmare bleeding into reality. He backed away slowly, heart pounding. Then, his phone buzzed. A notification. With trembling hands, he picked it up. A message, from an unknown number, just 2 words. I'm here. The air grew cold. Daniel turned toward the mirror on the wall and froze. In the reflection, he saw her, the woman in white, standing directly behind him. Her hair hung forward, her gown trailing like mist, her face pale and unnatural. Her lips curved into a faint, haunting smile. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He wanted to scream, to run, but his body refused to obey. He stood there, paralyzed, as the woman in the mirror stared back at him with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of sorrow and rage. Daniel spun around. Nothing. The room was empty. But when he looked back at the mirror, she was still there. Closer now, her hand reached out, pressing against the glass from the other side. The mirror trembled under the force, as though she were trying to push her way through. "No," Daniel whispered, stumbling backward. "This isn't real." He squeezed his eyes shut, praying that when he opened them, the nightmare would be over. But the chill in the air only intensified, and he could hear a faint, mournful whisper growing louder with each passing second. The mirror cracked, thin lines spreading like a spider's web. Her distorted figure stared back at him through the fractures, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Daniel's back hit the wall. There was nowhere left to run. He watched in horror as the cracks in the mirror widened, pieces of glass beginning to fall away. The woman's form seemed to ripple and shift, as though she were made of smoke and shadow. Then, in a voice like a whisper carried on the wind, she spoke. "You can't leave me." The mirror shattered. Shards exploded across the room. Daniel shielded his face, stumbling toward the door. He fumbled with the lock, flung it open, and sprinted into the night. The empty motel parking lot stretched before him, but in every shadow, every corner of darkness, he thought he saw her gown, her silhouette waiting. Daniel ran blindly, his bare feet slapping against the cold asphalt. He could hear her voice on the wind, calling his name, begging him to stay. The air around him grew colder with each step, and he could have sworn he felt icy fingers brushing against the back of his neck. He reached his car, hands shaking so badly he could barely get the key in the lock. As he wrenched the door open, he caught a glimpse of white in the rearview mirror. She was there, in the back seat, her pale face inches from his own. Daniel let out a strangled cry and stumbled backward. But when he looked again, the car was empty. Just his imagination playing tricks on him. It had to be. He threw himself into the driver's seat and started the engine, tires squealing as he peeled out of the parking lot. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty road ahead. Daniel's knuckles were white on the steering wheel as he pushed the car faster and faster. Miles flew by, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every time he glanced in the rearview mirror, he expected to see her ghostly face staring back at him. The radio crackled with static, occasionally catching fragments of a woman's voice singing a mournful lullaby. And as he drove away into the night, his headlights illuminated the road ahead. There she was, standing by the roadside, hand raised, waiting once more. Daniel's foot slammed on the brake, the car fishtailing as he swerved to avoid her. But she vanished like smoke the moment before impact. He sat there, engine idling, breath coming in ragged gasps. She appeared again, further down the road, and again, and again. Each time he approached, she would vanish, only to reappear in the distance. It was as though she were leading him somewhere, drawing him deeper into her ghostly realm. The landscape around him began to change. The familiar highway gave way to winding back roads, surrounded by dense forests that seemed to press in on all sides. Fog rolled in, thick and unnatural, obscuring everything beyond the reach of his headlights. Daniel knew he should turn back, find his way to the main road and civilization. But something compelled him forward. The woman in white's sorrow and longing had seeped into his very bones, and he found himself unable to resist her silent call. Finally, the road ended at the edge of a cliff overlooking a vast, misty valley. Daniel stepped out of the car, drawn to the precipice by an unseen force. There she stood, more solid and real than ever before, her white gown billowing in a wind he couldn't feel. "Why me?" Daniel asked, his voice barely a whisper. The woman in white turned to face him, and for the first time, he saw the depths of her pain etched across her ethereal features. "Because you saw me," she said, her voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "Because you stopped." She held out her hand, an invitation and a warning all at once. Daniel knew that if he took it, he would be crossing a threshold from which there was no return. But as he stared into her eyes, he saw not just the lonely spirit of legend, but a soul crying out for connection, for an end to its eternal wandering. His fingers intertwined with hers, cold as ice yet somehow comforting. The fog swirled around them, obscuring the world beyond. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Daniel and the woman in white faded away, leaving behind nothing but an empty car and a legend that would grow with each retelling. Those who drive that stretch of road late at night still claim to see a woman in white by the roadside. But now, they say, she's not alone. A man walks beside her, hand in hand, two lost souls finding peace in each other's company for all eternity. Daniel's hands trembled on the wheel as the pale figure appeared once more in his headlights. The woman in white, waiting, arm outstretched, just as before. His heart raced as he gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles turning white with tension. The familiar stretch of lonely road seemed to stretch endlessly before him, the darkness pressing in from all sides. "No," he whispered, pressing harder on the gas. He swerved, determined not to stop this time. The car roared past her, tires screeching against the asphalt. For a fleeting second, relief washed over him until he glanced in the rearview mirror. She was sitting in the back seat again. Daniel's breath caught in his throat, a cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. The spectral figure seemed more solid now, more present than ever before. Her face was clearer now, no longer hidden by her long, flowing hair. Hollow eyes, lifeless yet burning with a strange light, stared into him. Her lips parted in a smile that seemed too wide, too human, revealing teeth that gleamed unnaturally in the dim light of the car's interior. Daniel nearly lost control of the car, swerving dangerously close to the edge of the road. His heart pounded in his chest, threatening to burst through his ribcage. "What do you want from me?" he screamed, his voice cracking with fear and desperation. Her voice filled the car, chilling, echoing though her lips barely moved. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, surrounding him, suffocating him. "Take me home," she whispered, the words carrying a weight that pressed down on Daniel's very soul. Daniel's throat tightened, his mouth dry as he struggled to form words. "Where?" he managed to croak out, dreading the answer but knowing he had no choice but to ask. Her pale hand slowly rose, pointing ahead, toward the dense forest beyond the road. The trees loomed ominously, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers in the darkness. The GPS on his dashboard flickered, the screen glitching, yet somehow mapping a path to a place that wasn't there. Numbers and symbols danced across the display, forming impossible routes through the wilderness. Compelled by fear, and something else he couldn't name, Daniel followed the route. The road twisted into the woods, darker and quieter than anywhere he had driven before. The headlights barely penetrated the thick fog that had suddenly descended, wrapping the car in an eerie, isolating blanket. Shadows danced at the edges of his vision, taking on shapes that seemed to move and shift with unnatural fluidity. Eventually, he came upon a clearing. The fog parted like a curtain, revealing a sight that made Daniel's blood run cold. A crumbling cemetery. Forgotten, overgrown, its weathered headstones jutting from the earth like broken teeth. Vines and moss covered much of the stonework, nature slowly reclaiming what had once been a place of reverence and remembrance. The woman in white vanished from the seat, leaving behind only a lingering chill that raised goosebumps on Daniel's skin. He sat there for a moment, engine idling, staring out at the graveyard with a mixture of dread and morbid fascination. Daniel's chest heaved as he finally worked up the courage to step out of the car. The night air was thick and heavy, carrying the scent of damp earth and decay. His flashlight trembled in his grip, the beam dancing erratically across the overgrown grass and crumbling monuments. The graves stretched in rows, most names eroded with time, their stories lost to the ages. But one stood out, its stone cracked, the engraving faint yet visible. Daniel's feet moved of their own accord, drawing him closer to the weathered headstone. His flashlight illuminated the inscription, revealing words that sent a shiver down his spine. Elena Marrow, 1901-1922. The name struck him like a blow, resonating with a familiarity he couldn't explain. Beneath it, carved into the weathered stone, were words nearly erased by moss. Taken too soon, forever waiting. Daniel's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of a puzzle he didn't fully understand. Who was Elena Marrow? Why had the woman in white led him here? The questions swirled in his mind, each one leading to more uncertainties. A chill wind swept through the clearing, rustling the leaves and carrying with it the faint scent of lilies. And then, he heard it. The bell-like sound of laughter, soft and ethereal, yet unmistakably present. She was there, standing by her grave, her form glowing faintly in the moonlight. Her white dress billowed gently in a breeze that seemed to touch nothing else. Daniel's voice cracked as he spoke, the words barely more than a whisper. "This is your home." Her head tilted slowly, the movement unnaturally smooth. Those hollow eyes fixed on him once more, a spark of something. Recognition? Triumph? Flickering in their depths. "Now you know," she replied, her voice carrying the weight of decades of loneliness and waiting. The ground beneath the grave shifted, the soil cracking open with a sound like tearing fabric. Daniel stumbled back, watching in horror as her spectral figure leaned over the broken earth, her smile widening unnaturally. The cracks spread, widening into gaping fissures that seemed to lead to an endless void. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice a mixture of longing and menace. The invitation, or was it a command, hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken promises and threats. Hands, pale, bony, dozens of them, reached out from the grave, clawing the ground, reaching for him. Skeletal fingers grasped at the air, seeking purchase on the world of the living. Daniel screamed, the sound tearing from his throat as primal terror overtook him. He turned and ran, his feet slipping on the dew-slick grass as he desperately made his way back to his car. He fumbled for the keys with shaking hands, dropping them once before managing to jam them into the ignition. The engine roared to life, a comforting sound amidst the otherworldly horror that surrounded him. But even as hope began to flicker in his chest, a new dread settled over him. The windows fogged instantly, a thick layer of condensation obscuring his view of the outside world. Across the glass, written in long, streaking letters, appeared her final message: "You can't escape." Panic surged through Daniel as he frantically wiped at the windshield, trying to clear his view. He slammed the accelerator, tearing out of the clearing, the graveyard fading in his rearview mirror. The car bounced and jolted as he sped down the overgrown path, branches scraping against the sides like skeletal fingers trying to hold him back. But even as he sped away, putting distance between himself and that forsaken place, Daniel knew the truth. It settled into his bones, a cold certainty that chilled him more than any ghostly encounter. The woman in white was bound to him now. He had taken her to her grave, but instead of freeing her, he had sealed his fate. The realization weighed on him, a burden he knew he would carry for the rest of his days. And on every empty road, in every rearview glance, he would see her, waiting, smiling. A constant reminder of the night he had stumbled into a world beyond his understanding. The woman in white was never gone, her presence a shadow that would follow him through every moment of his life. As Daniel drove through the night, putting miles between himself and the cemetery, he couldn't shake the feeling that his journey was far from over. The road stretched out before him, dark and full of unknowns. But now he carried with him a terrible knowledge, and the certainty that no matter how far he ran, she would always be there, waiting, watching, forever bound to the man who had finally brought her home.